There's something mysterious about the mountains. The towering peaks, the shadowed forests, and the cold winds seem to hold secrets that many never return to tell. Our story takes place in one such remote corner of the Indian Himalayas, where three friends, eager for adventure, set off on a trek they would never forget. Their journey took them to a place few dared to trek, where ancient tales of a deadly pond and a sinister guide still linger in the whispers of the locals. It was the monsoon season when Arjun, Meera, and Rohit, all avid trekkers from the city, decided to take on a challenging trek in the northern hills. The weather was unpredictable, but they were determined. The path to their destination was far from easy, winding through dense forests and steep slopes. As they reached a small village at the foot of the mountains, they met a weathered old man sitting by a campfire. His name was Kundan, a local guide known for his knowledge of the mountains. His face was covered in deep lines, and his eyes held a certain coldness, almost as though he'd seen too much. Despite his old age, Kundan's posture was erect, and his voice carried a deep authority. "Are you sure you want to go further?" Kundan asked, his gaze lingering on the trio. "There are places in those mountains where even the bravest dare not step." The three friends, eager to prove their courage, laughed it off. They paid him and hired him as their guide, unaware that their decision would lead them straight into the heart of an ancient curse. Their journey began with excitement. The air was thick with mist as they trekked deeper into the mountains. Kundan, though a man of few words, occasionally shared cryptic warnings about the terrain. "Stay on the trail," he would say, his voice low. "Don't venture off the path. The forest here is not what it seems." But the friends, young and brimming with confidence, dismissed his warnings as superstition. They pushed on, unaware that the forest had already begun to change. The trees grew taller, their twisted branches seeming to stretch out like fingers, clawing at the sky. Around dusk, Kundan led them to a clearing. In the center of it was a pond, still, unnervingly so. Its surface was like glass, reflecting the darkening sky above. The water had an unnatural, almost black hue, and there was a strange, thick mist rising from it, swirling in the air. "This is the Kali Talab, the Black Pond," Kundan whispered, his voice strained. "No one dares go near it. It's said to be cursed, a place where spirits dwell. The pond claims those who disturb it." Arjun, ever the skeptic, walked toward the edge, laughing it off. "It's just a pond, old man. Nothing but some dark water." But as he stepped closer to the water, the temperature around them seemed to drop. The air grew thick and suffocating, and the sound of the forest seemed to fade away. It was as if the pond itself had consumed all noise, leaving only an eerie silence. Meera noticed the reflection of the pond was wrong, distorted. Shapes moved beneath the surface, shadowy forms that didn't belong. Suddenly, she felt a cold hand grip her shoulder. She spun around, but no one was there. As the night grew colder, Kundan urged them to move on. But a strange unease had taken hold of the group. Arjun, though dismissive of the warnings, now found himself looking back at the pond, feeling an undeniable pull. Something was wrong. They made camp not far from the pond, and as the fire crackled, Kundan began to tell a story. "Many years ago," Kundan began, his voice a raspy whisper, "a group of travelers came this way. They too ignored the warnings and camped near the pond. At night, they heard voices calling to them from the water. They thought it was the wind, or perhaps a trick of the mind." He paused, his eyes narrowing. But then, one by one, they disappeared. Vanished into thin air. No one saw them again. The only thing left behind were their footprints, leading into the water. Arjun scoffed. "That's just a story to scare us, right?" But Kundan didn't respond. He simply stared into the fire, as though lost in his own thoughts. The group tried to sleep, but the crackling fire and the strange noises from the forest kept them awake. Suddenly, a scream broke the silence, a loud, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the night. Meera and Rohit bolted upright, eyes wide in fear. They could hear something moving, something large and heavy. But there was no wind, no rustling of trees. Only the faint sound of footsteps, circling their camp. Kundan was gone. The friends scrambled out of their tents, calling out his name, but there was no sign of him. In the distance, they heard the low, guttural sound of chanting, something ancient and foreign. The air grew thick with an unnatural pressure, and the earth beneath them seemed to vibrate. Panicked, Meera started looking for escape routes. "We have to leave. Now." But as they turned to flee, they saw Kundan, standing by the edge of the pond. His back was to them, his hands raised toward the water, as though in some kind of trance. Suddenly, the water in the pond began to churn violently. Shapes, dark, indistinct figures, began to rise from the depths. Kundan, his eyes wide and empty, began chanting in a language none of them understood. His voice, no longer human, seemed to vibrate with the very ground beneath their feet. The figures rose higher, their forms becoming more distinct, ghostly faces, twisted and grotesque, staring back at them with hollow eyes. They start to run while saying this can't be real. And the shadows were closing in. Narrator, in that moment, as the figures emerged from the pond, something broke through the trance. Kundan, his face now a mask of terror, turned to the friends. "Run!" he screamed, his voice breaking. "Run! You have to get out of here. The pond. It doesn't forgive." The ground beneath them shook, and the figures from the pond lunged toward Kundan. With one last scream, he was dragged into the water, disappearing into the dark abyss. Arjun, Meera, and Rohit didn't hesitate. They turned and ran, pushing through the forest, the sounds of the ghostly figures following them, the ground quaking beneath their feet. When they finally stumbled out of the forest, breathless and covered in mud, the sun was just beginning to rise. The air felt lighter, but they knew the horrors they had witnessed would never leave them. They never spoke of what happened again. And to this day, no one has returned to the Kali Talab. The black pond remains, still and silent, as the whispers of those who vanished echo through the mountains. Remember, when you trek the mountains, some paths are better left untouched. Some places are cursed, and some guides are never truly what they seem. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.